Welcome everybody to the 20th annual Fighting Bob Fest. We had hoped to be live in the Barrymore Theater, but as you can see, the Delta variant of the coronavirus has forced us into a mostly virtual event. Delta is the Greek letter that symbolizes change, and it certainly has created a change in our plans this year. But still, Fighting Bob Fest goes on, and we're really pleased to bring you this wonderful lineup of speakers. By the way, these progressive face masks are available. If you'd like one for yourself, you can go to our website at progressive.org, and you can order one of these face masks along with some other progressive merchandise. And you can support the Progressive Magazine in many different ways, by subscribing, by donating, or just by reading. Our website, progressive.org, is updated daily with news stories, and our magazine comes out every other month, delivered to your home. I want to thank all the people that made this Fighting Bob Fest possible tonight. Certainly all of our speakers, a wonderful lineup that you'll be hearing from over the next hour or so. But also I want to thank the Barrymore Theater for opening their doors to us every year as they do to host this event. I want to thank Brian Alberth and Left Effect Media for filming this Fighting Bob Fest, this virtual Fighting Bob Fest yet again this year. And I want to thank all of you for watching and attending this year's 20th annual Fighting Bob Fest. Our first speaker, I'm very pleased to have tonight with us Representative Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich was a city council member, a mayor in Cleveland, Ohio, and a member of the U.S. Congress from 1997 to 2013. He also ran for governor of Ohio and for president of the United States. And in June of this year, he announced again his run for mayor of the city of Cleveland. Tonight, Dennis Kucinich joins us virtually from Cleveland, Ohio.
Hello, Bob Fest. This is Dennis Kucinich. I'm talking to you from Cleveland, Ohio. And I am in the closing days of a race for mayor, something that I actually did 44 years ago when I was first elected as America's youngest mayor in the city of Cleveland. And I'm back to complete the work of establishing a government that is truly responsive to the concerns of people. Some of you may remember the last time that I was mayor, I fought a pitched battle to save our municipal electric system from a privatization. Matter of fact, it took me many years to actually tell the story. It's embodied in a book entitled The Division of Light and Power, which was just released midsummer. And that book chronicles the story of not just the fight against privatization, but of an effort to organize a community to where government works for the people in every way, shape, and form, where the resources of the city are poured into the community, and where the jobs were distributed equally across the city, and where the African-American community was a partner in governance. And this was 44 years ago. So here we are, back to the future. And what that future represents for Clevelanders today is a strong statements and programs that address the poverty that has struck Cleveland with a vengeance. A third of the people in the city of Cleveland living at or below the poverty line. And Cleveland, unfortunately, is also one of the most violent cities of America, in America. There's a lot of different thoughts about police reform, but just to get this out of the way, I'm not for defunding the police. I think that what we need to do is to retrain the police to be racially sensitive, culturally aware, constitutionally informed, and to create a transformation in the city with respect to law enforcement. I wanted to share with you how I intend to do that in Cleveland. Some of you may remember when I was in Congress, I proposed the creation of a cabinet-level Department of Peace. And the whole idea of that was to begin in national government a rethinking of the purpose of government, which unfortunately has been to wage violence all over the world, but to instead to wage nonviolence and to create programs that look at those things that are precursors of violence. Poverty, want, lack of access to food, to water, certain climate disruptions can cause that. Certainly, racism, corporate activities like in the Niger Delta years ago with respect to oil. There's a lot of things that can create violence on a national level, which, the progressive over the years has cataloged. But at a local level, which when I introduced the legislation on July the 11th, 2001, 2 months before 9/11, on a local level, we talk about looking at the issues of gang violence, gun violence, racial violence, violence against gays, police community clashes. This was 20 years ago I was talking about this, and coming up with programs to structure an approach, and on a municipal level. I want in Cleveland, and this election, among other things, is about creating a civic peace department. I intend to make peace the central organizing proposition of the city of Cleveland if the people elect me mayor. And the way that I will do that is not just to create a department and another bureaucracy, but to have the work of every city department, law enforcement, be adjacent to or proximate to peace to the extent that it can create peaceful activities in a community. Health, link it to peace. Housing, linked to peace. Peace is central. Education, peace, and bring peace education into the schools in a major way. I want to have restorative justice be part of the approach that we make, so that those people who found themselves on the other side of the law for whatever reason are given an opportunity to reenter society in a gainful way. I'm looking at rebuilding the civic infrastructure. And so these ambitious plans really are the result of a career that began in 1967. I find it hard to believe myself that I've been at it this long, but I have like all of you, a dedication to the people, to the community that is not bounded by time. And so we move forward. There is an election in Cleveland. You don't get to do these things unless you get elected. And so I'm at this moment in the closing days of the primary campaign, which is on September the 14th. And if I make it past the primary, there's a runoff at the top two in the general election. But you'll be hearing a lot about this campaign. The website, by the way, is kucinich.com. You'll be hearing a lot about the campaign, not just because it'll be a return to City Hall 44 years later. And let me tell you, I'm in better shape now than I was then for a lot of reasons, one of which is being a vegan. But also because of the approaches that we're talking about, taking Cleveland in a whole new direction. So thank you to the Progressive Magazine, to all those of you who are celebrating the work of Bob LaFollette, which continues, as does my work. And I look forward to, at some point in the not too distant future, being able to go beyond a virtual appearance to join with you as we continue our efforts to help be part of this, the transformational potential of governance, which is expressed through our everyday commitment and involvement. So thanks again. Enjoy BobFest, and I'll look forward to joining you and to hopefully after I'm elected mayor of Cleveland again. Bye now, and thanks.
Hello, I'm Senator Tammy Baldwin, and welcome to this year's Fighting BobFest. Thank you to the Progressive for bringing us all together. And I want to express my gratitude to all of you for your commitment to fighting for the progressive values we share and that have defined Wisconsin. I have the great honor of occupying the same Senate seat as the namesake of today's festivities, Fighting Bob LaFollette. Fighting Bob represented Wisconsin because he was concerned that powerful corporate interests were being well served in Washington, but ordinary people weren't even being heard. From the back of hay wagons to stages, he traveled all around our great state to deliver a message that came to define our state's progressive tradition. I've heard from Wisconsinites that our economic system is tilted towards the people up top. Meanwhile, the concerns and struggles of working class families go unnoticed in DC. But our democracy exists to make sure everybody gets a fair shot, not just the well-connected. And I know that if we stand together, we can give a voice to those that need to be heard. Our state's motto is one word, forward. And together we will move forward and help write the next chapter of Wisconsin's proud, progressive tradition. I promise to always fight for working people and be a champion for Wisconsin families. Upholding Fighting Bob's legacy is my greatest honor. Thank you and have a great night.
So glad you could be here today. I am especially glad to be here as a big Fighting Bob La Follette buff. I'm going to show you, this is my Fighting Bob La Follette button collection over the years, from governor's races and presidential races in 1924 when he ran. And I am a big fan of the progressive tradition of Fighting Bob La Follette and all that he did for Wisconsin that we led on for the entire nation. The La Follette Weekly was the magazine that he and Bell started. It is now the Progressive Magazine, and we're so fortunate to have the Progressive Magazine still going strong right here out of Madison, Wisconsin, and very proud to be able to work with everyone putting on this today.
Hello, Fighting Bob Fest. I am Mandela Barnes, Lieutenant Governor, and I am so incredibly honored to be joining you all once again, this time for the 20th annual Fighting Bob Fest. Now, while virtual again this year, I am incredibly thankful to Progressive Magazine for being sure to take this pandemic seriously and hosting with the health and safety of everyone in mind, because we want to come back in full force next year. So I'm still excited to be able to celebrate with you all as we channel and reflect on the legacy of Fighting Bob La Follette. Now, we know that there are no shortage of issues in this state and this country, especially marginalized communities. We know that voting rights continue to be threatened in epic proportions. Histories are being erased from our nation's education systems. Workers and unions still face constant threats, and there's a deadly pandemic that continues to rage throughout this country. And then there's the pandemic of systemic racism that continues to ravage communities of color. And then there's climate change that has wreaked havoc on our planet and so many of our communities all across the country. Now, we know to fight against this, we have to organize. And we have to fight for bold legislation. It can't just be about what we're against. It has to be about what we're for. And a few weeks ago, I was honored to speak in Washington, D.C., and a few other events commemorating the March on Washington and the need for us to advance the cause of voting rights. And just like the 1963 March on Washington, the march today was in solidarity towards a more just, fair, and equitable society, and the need for legislation like the For the People Act that would implement systemic changes, sweeping changes that would ensure that every voter can readily access the ballot box and have their voices heard. We also know that we have to protect the right to organize with the PRO Act, which is a landmark worker empowerment, civil rights, and economic stimulus piece of legislation. We know that here in Wisconsin, we also must have a bold, unapologetic, progressive agenda that doesn't just return to what we knew as normal, but in a way that paves the way for an inclusive, just, and equitable future, where opportunity exists for everybody, where working people can join a union and earn at least $15 an hour, where quality health care is available to everyone, and also a secure retirement and other amenities and other perks that should come with employment. We know that families should also be able to stay together so that they can thrive. You know, most importantly, we need clean air, clean water to drink. We also have to continue to do the work to tear down systemic racism and achieve justice and equitable for all people. Now, while this may seem difficult, we've done it before. We've risen up in the face of unprecedented struggles, the ones that have threatened our progress in so many areas of life. with so many bad actors who continue to try to keep us down. We thought they were gone, but they're still here. But rather than sit back or sit still, we're going to continue to stand up and not give up. We're going to fight for healthcare, for safety, for justice for our communities. So again, let's all channel the legacy of Fighting Bob LaFollette to continue to make our voices heard and our values felt for a more fair, a more just, and a more equitable state of Wisconsin. We know that a strong Wisconsin equals a strong United States of America. We've led. We have done this before. We've taken on the big challenges. We've done the bold things. We've made history before, and we're going to make history again. We're the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, the first state to declare the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional, first state that gave protections for LGBTQ citizens here in Wisconsin. And as we meet the emerging threats and challenges of today and of tomorrow, we'll respond in kind. But we know that the only way that we can win is if we do it together. If we build a broad coalition, then we go beyond building coalition and doing the work to build community. Because the work to build community is what lasts. People from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, people who come together in the spirit of justice and the spirit of progress. I know this is not a crowd that needs to be reminded of it, but in organizing, it means that we go beyond rooms like this. It means that we go beyond events like Fighting Bob Fest. It means that we leave the Zoom and we go out into the communities. We go out into the streets. We organize. We do the work of justice. It means we bring on board people who may not have been a part of this fight, who may not have been a part of this struggle before. I believe that we can win. I know that we will win. I know that we will bring justice. I know that progress will be the new reality as long as we're willing to work for it, as long as we push together and pull together and demand more. We demand accountability from our leaders, and we demand accountability from ourselves to make sure that we all do the right thing. So I just want to say thank you so much for having me. Truly wish I could be in person, truly wish we could be doing this together so that we can feel the energy of the room, so that we could leave the Barrymore and go right out into the streets and do the work that has to be done for a more prosperous future for everyone, so that opportunity can be expected in every community. We can't rest until we reach that reality. So thanks again, everybody, for having me, and I look forward to seeing you all in person sometime soon when it is safe to do so. Have a good night.
Down on Convent Street, broken window at my feet. All the broken homeless angels hold the night. Tell me where the hooks are at to unhang all their hats. Is the gambler's dharma hiding in plain sight? Gambler's dharma hiding in plain sight. Early in the morning, your medicine is strong, and the four directions nail you to the dawn. Walk out of doors alone, your secret written on a stone. It's a short time here, but a very long time gone. Short time here, but a very long time gone. Swallows, as they say, they shake out homeward ways. All my relations come and kiss the dirt. One thing you must do The heart knows this true. Learning all where to love and who. Learning all where to love and who. Concerning what may come, concerning what may go. Even when our shadows don't fit us right, from now and for all time, I'll trade you yours for mine. And I play my gambler's dawn, my hand with you. Play my gambler's dawn, my hand with you. Play my gambler's dawn, my hand with you. Play my gambler's dawn, my hand with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Flanders of The Laura Flanders Show, where, as Jim Hightower taught me to say, the people who say it can't be done take a backseat to the people who are doing it. You can join us every week on public television or radio or your local community radio. Sign up for the podcast or join us on YouTube for the premiere every Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We have a live chat with our guests. I wish, though, that I could be there with you in person, the 20th anniversary of Fighting Bob Fest. Yay! I also hear that you are participating, many of you, in a rededication of the grave markers of the Follettes later this week. I think it is. I'd like to be there for that, too, because we need a little rededication. We also need perhaps to commune a little with Bob and Belle. Frankly, I think if they were here with us right now, they'd be pretty mad. I think they'd say we're not fighting anywhere near hard enough. Are we standing up for the rights of women in Afghanistan? Well, maybe some of us. Are we standing up for abortion rights and reproductive justice in Texas? We're doing our best. Are we fighting back against racist policing and Jim Crow election tests all across this country? We're trying. And what about in Wisconsin? Are we organizing as well as the right is organizing to take down public education in the name of fighting some phantom called critical race theory? I think perhaps not. Most importantly, I think Bob La Follette would be saying, what about those billionaires? In the last year, in the year of COVID, 2020, the worst year in which the pandemic hit, latest reports from the Institute for Policy Studies suggest that the billionaires of this country increased their wealth by 62%, some $1.5 or $6 trillion of gain of wealth in just those 12 months. That's half of the full $3.5 trillion investment package that the Biden administration's struggling to get through Congress and the Senate. They're struggling because a whole lot of people would prefer to do the bidding of the billionaires than the bidding of the rest of us. And that was the argument that Bob La Follette and Belle were making over 100 years ago. We can't sit back and leave it to someone else, said Bob. I'm sure Belle put him up to it. We can't sit back and think that the change we need will come about from Washington. Voting once every few years is not enough. Now, I know that you know this, but Bob would remind us, as would Belle, Fighting Bob Fest should remind us that fighting has to continue. Maybe not in the streets, but in creative ways all the time, every place. And for that, I think we need to rededicate not just the graves of the Follettes, but ourselves to this fight and to the idea of democracy and majority and a process of rule by, with, and for the people. Really, I think the La Follettes would be saying, we need to rededicate ourselves to one another. And if we can't do it in person, then at least we can do it through the internet. I wish you a very happy Fighting Bob Fest. I wish I could be there for the rededication of the graves. I am hereby rededicating myself to bringing you weekly visions and stories and reports of how we can create a more democratic economy, a more democratic society, and a healthier, more regenerative planet. We can, and we can learn from the people out there doing it, but only if we get to hear about them, meet them. So support your independent media that bring you the news that others won't. Rededicate yourself to Fighting Bob Fest and to the fight for a progressive future. Don't let the clock run out. For Fighting Bob Fest 2021, till we're in person again next year, I'm Laura Flanders. Thanks.
My name is Greg Palast. You can tell by my hat that I'm an investigative reporter. Maybe you've seen me on Democracy Now! Or on BBC, or read my stuff in The Guardian or in The Progressive, or seen my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. For decades, I've been investigating vote trickery. Watch this. We're about to meet with a GOP official who says that she has personal knowledge that 32,000 people are voting illegally in this county.
So my name is Pamela Reardon. I am currently 6th District Committee woman to the state party. I know for sure voters do not live here.
This year, Georgia's GOP-controlled legislature passed a new law saying you can challenge an unlimited number of voters. Do you know this woman? Do you recognize that woman?
Not offhand. I don't.
You never spoke to her?
No, no.
What about this guy and his wife on his honeymoon? Do you recognize that man?
No.
So you didn't call him, but you challenged his right to vote or have his ballot challenged.
Sir, get out of my house.
Okay, I will get out of your house.
The challenge statute didn't ever contemplate someone coming to town and challenging hundreds of thousands of voters at one time. This, in our view, was an abuse of that statute. That doesn't mean that you get to print out reams and reams of Excel spreadsheets and just, levy a charge against thousands of people that you don't even know and get them, removed off the rolls.
Imagine using the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871.
It gets real when you get arrested. It gets real.
You heard of the Ku Klux Klan law of 1871?
I'm from Canada.
So you don't know the Ku Klux Klan law?
I'm from Canada.
Clearly you don't know Georgia law. He's a legal voter.
I got my right to vote in '94.
Okay,
so I don't like people voting illegally.
Get out of my house now.
I shall get out of your house
before
now.
I throw you.
And you are sure that this is your legal voting address?
You are an asshole.
Georgia, divided down the middle, and this civil war ain't over. This is Greg Palast in Georgia, reporting. All right, laugh at the goobers in Georgia, but Wisconsin is just as bad. Take a look at this, a report I did for Black Voters Matter. I discovered that in Wisconsin, right now, the state's purging 40,000 voters, almost everyone a black citizen in Milwaukee or students in Madison. I'd like to tell you about the Wisconsin vote game, but right now I'm concerned about suppression of other voters, including Fawad Andarabi. Fawad was a popular singer in Afghanistan. Taliban don't like pop singing. So Fawad invited them to his home outside Kabul and fed them respectful luncheon, and then they took him out and shot him in the head. The same day I heard of Fawad's execution, I got an email from a progressive women's organization to join via Zoom in a so-called celebration of the end of the forever war in Afghanistan. I told you I'm an investigative reporter, and facts matter to me. And here are the facts. Do you know how many U.S. soldiers have died in Afghanistan in the last year? Exactly 0. No American soldiers lost a fingernail. U.S. soldiers in combat, the crazy night raids, That ended years ago. Still, Donald Trump called it the forever war. And believe it or not, Trump got the facts wrong. And just because Trump's lie is spit out of Joe Biden's mouth doesn't make it the truth. Look, we had only 3,000 troops in Afghanistan. But our tiny commitment, the threat of our power, kept the Taliban fascists out of Kabul. And it was enough to allow the number of girls in schools to rise by 330%, enough to protect the 100,000 women who, until this week, were enrolled in Afghani universities. Now in Herat, all the girls' schools are closed, and 3 women were gunned down for vaccinating children. Now, in that virtual celebration of the end of the so-called forever war, there wasn't one Afghani woman on the Zoom celebration. So you'll excuse me if I don't join in the celebration either. Thank you.
Easy Mosin can't get it. Move fast to save your life. Saviors come and go, but only to slow the strife. Say, tell me what you doing in Babylon when the Lord's day is at hand. When the judgment awakens the beast, even the just won't have a place to stand. Sliding slow through Kansas City when the word was laid on me. Got a message from the Father, I just could not let it be. He said, Sparky, tell me what you doing in Babylon when the Lord's day is at hand. Yeah, when the judgment awakens the beast, even the just won't have a place to stand. Gotta save the just and lost. Send a message down to the people. No matter what the cost, tell them, say, what you doing in Babylon? When the Lord's day is at hand. When the judgment awakens up here, even the just won't have a place to stand.
Hi, Fighting Bobbers. I am Ruth Conniff, editor-at-large of the Progressive Magazine and editor-in-chief of the Wisconsin Examiner. I'm sitting in our offices now a few steps from the Capitol. We are the state's newest and largest Capitol News Bureau, and we are dedicated to digging up the truth in the Badger State. We're part of a network of nonprofit news sites online created by State's Newsroom, which is opening Capitol bureaus like these all over the country to fill the gap as other outlets shut down and cut back. Some of the highlights of our first 2 years of existence, recent highlights, include Isaiah Holmes' report about the new bill that you probably haven't heard of that increases police access to your cell phone data. Isaiah has also done groundbreaking reports on community struggles against over-policing and police violence all over the state that you won't see anywhere else. Eric Gunn has done groundbreaking labor reporting, including a recent scoop on Governor Scott Walker's Act 10 and why it does not limit UW Healthcare's ability to bargain collectively with its nurses. Henry Redmond has done rural reports and stories on small towns and small courtrooms all over the state, including he's been following closely our Natural Resources Board chair's refusal to step down after his term expired, even though his replacement has been named by the governor. And of course, Melanie Conklin, with her inimitable inside information from the Capitol, is giving you everyday reports on what's going on with the legislature, including Speaker Robin Voss's failure to unite his base around his sucking up to Donald Trump and his ridiculous election audit. In spite of those efforts, the base continues to be fractured. So whether it's the scoops that we've done on redistricting and the effort to draw new maps after the 2020 census, where the Republicans are trying to hang on to their gerrymandered map and keep themselves in power, or the power grab from Democratic Governor Tony Evers, whether it's public schools battles over state funding and COVID rules, or PFAS contamination, or climate change, we are digging up the truth in the Badger State and giving you information. As Fighting Bob LaFollette said, the people need a champion against the power of big money and its corrupting influence in politics. And the only way that we can really fight back against that influence is if we have an informed public. Fighting Bobfest is part of that, the Progressive Magazine is part of that, and the Examiner is part of it. So check us out online, get our free email newsletter in your inbox every day, and join us, connect with us, and have a great fest. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed Garvey. He was actually polite in the introduction. That's astonishing. Hello, Wisconsin. Good to be with you. What a joy. It just makes me happier than a red robin to come bobbing along here to Baraboo, Wisconsin for the annual Bobfest blowout. And of course, I do come to you from Texas, no longer the state of Texas, though. Thanks to our Republican governor, who, by the way, puts the goober in gubernatorial. We are now the secessionist Republic of Republican Ridiculousness, or Absurdistan, as we call it, down home. Thank you. Thank you. Joy to be back at the Baraboo with the Barrymore with you madcap Madisonians as we gather on the eve of another Baraboo Babalooza. Now, as Ed indicates, in its 9th year, I mean a decade of down and dirty democracy building. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ed Garvey. What a joy. Hello, Wisconsin. Wow. Yeah. Ed Garvey, by God. He's a little bit Irish. Have you noticed? If Ed was on the street and there was free ice cream over here, on this side of the street, and there was a fight going on over here. Ed would cross the street and say, "Is this a private fight or can anybody get in?" That's the attitude that I like. Well, it's a joy to be back with all you good folks at the Barrymore, you feisty Bobfesters who get fired up for the 10th annual Bobapalooza that we're going to have tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a joy, what a happy night. I mean, to kick it off like this. So it's great to be back here at Bobfest.
Hello, Bobfesters. Just a perfect joy for me to be back with you Garvey Eastas, you wild-ass Scott Walker butt kickers, for another Bobapalooza and a full day of edification at the hands of our man Ed Garvey here, putting on the best political party in America right here in Madison, Wisconsin. You know, there's an old cowboy saying out in West Texas, "Speak the truth, but ride a fast horse." And the truth is, of course, that our government has become a wholly owned subsidiary of Wall Street and the corporate elite, who are openly supplanting our democracy with their kleptocracy, a government of thieves, of, by, and for the bankers and bosses, the big shots, bastards, and bullshitters who think that they are entitled to run roughshod over we the people. We need your feisty spirit, your hard facts and hard truths, your democratic principles and citizen action more than ever before, because there are powerful forces of plutocracy, autocracy, theocracy, and kleptocracy loose on our land, out to change America itself, change the very idea of America as a unique society trying to reach toward egalitarianism and the common good. You know, Benjamin Franklin at the start wrote that the destiny of America is not power, but light. Light. And the light he meant was the light of those values of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's the light of America. They're trying to steal our America from us. They're trying to steal those ideals of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. That's what they're taking from us. That's what's at stake. That's why you are so important. I'll leave you with this. Intensify your effort. In the words of Louis Grizzard, the late great Southern humorist, he pointed out something that we in the South have always known to be true, and that's that there's a great big difference between being naked and being naked. Being naked means you have no clothes on, but being naked, that means you have no clothes on and you are up to something. So let's all get naked together. Thank you very much. Glad to be with you. Thanks to Bobfest.
We've got to make this happen. Thank you for your support. Thank you for Bobfest's feistiness. Thank you for standing up and speaking out. Thank you for daring to take on the powers that be on behalf of the powers that ought to be. You're an inspiration to all of us across this country who give a damn about this country and about this democracy. Do your part. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow at Fighting Bobfest.
Thanks everybody for joining us for this 20th annual Fighting Bobfest. We've got a lot more speakers and musicians for you tonight, so stay tuned. Also, I want to tell you that the Progressive Magazine, which is sponsoring this event, is always available to you online at progressive.org, with daily stories being put up on the website, and also a bi-monthly print magazine. You can subscribe by going to progressive.org/subscribe, and you can also donate to support this work at progressive.org/donate. Please support us and help us keep bringing you this important news and information. Our next speaker is Bill Leaders, the editor of the Progressive Magazine.
Well, thank you all for being here, however remotely. I so look forward to the time when we can come together again in person in this lovely theater with its awesome sound system and reaffirm our commitment to progressive change. You know, it's common to say that the last year and a half has been difficult. There's no denying that. But for those of us at the Progressive, it has also been a reminder of the importance of our work. From the early days of the pandemic on, we've felt a sense of urgency about what we do. We were and still are doing everything we can to cover what is happening with COVID-19, with the rise of the radical right, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with calls to reform our criminal justice system, with our coverage of the ravages and challenges of climate change, with our nationally recognized reporting on immigration, with the battle to defend truth against lies. Every day, we do what we do in the hope and the belief that we can make things a little better, by shining a light on what's going on, by giving voice to the voiceless, by providing a forum for reporters and commentators who have important things to say, by calling positive attention to innovative approaches like guaranteed income programs and worker co-ops and community schools. Besides producing a monthly magazine, a bi-monthly magazine, and maintaining a website with new stories each day, our small operation, just 6 full-time people, run 2 projects. The first is called Public Schools Advocate, where we have built a network of teachers and other education experts all around the country to write about threats to our public school system. I truly believe that we helped the previous Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, be as unsuccessful as she was. We have also, for nearly 30 years, run a project that's now called Progressive Perspectives, where about 3 times a week we make available to hundreds of newspapers across the country op-eds on various subjects of progressive concern. Each year, millions of people read the work being produced by a diverse group of contributors. We work with other nonprofit groups, including the Institute for Policy Studies, Human Rights Watch, the Green Lining Institute, and the Sierra Club, to find homes for our op-eds. We also work with people who just happen to hear about us or who have attended one of the dozens of workshops we put on around the country. I remind you again, we are a very small group. Just me, Norm Stockwell, who deserves primary credit for putting together this event tonight. Our web editor, Cassidy Turala, associate editor, Emilio Lianza, office manager, Elizabeth Miller, development director, Daniel Libby, together with our art director, Kirsten Dine, a couple of fact-checkers, Diana Cook and Catherine Cronin, and some able interns, currently including Nora Kathleen Berryhill. I'm proud of the Progressive, proud of the work that we have done with such limited resources. I think we do make a difference in the way that our founder, Fighting Bob La Follette, intended. As he expressed it in his autobiography, democracy is a life and involves continual struggle. It is only as those of every generation who love democracy resist with all their might the encroachments of its enemies that the ideals of representative government can even be nearly approximated. Thank you for joining Fighting Bob Fest. The Progressive appreciates your support. Tell everybody you know to subscribe. Together, we can change the world. Thank you.
Hello, Fighting Bob Fest. It is so good to be here today. I want to start by thanking the organizers who made today's event possible as we are celebrating 20 years of this important forum. But I also want to take an opportunity to thank the Progressive Magazine, not only for their work to make today's event, but for what they do every single day in uplifting important progressive values, progressive ideas, and progressive voices. You know, one of the reasons I'm actually standing here today as Wisconsin State Treasurer is because of the Progressive Magazine. They have this program called the Media Project that provides progressive leaders with tools on how to write op-eds. And for me, I really wanted to save the state treasurer's office. I was worried that this important office was under attack. And after finishing their workshop, I published an op-ed that was published across the state, and I am proud to say that together, we stopped Scott Walker's power grab. And that's what this is about. It's about doing what's right for our state and for working people. You know, you look at Fighting Bob La Follette. What did his legacy was the Wisconsin idea. The idea that brought together our University of Wisconsin leaders with politicians and policymakers to tackle some of our toughest challenges and generate change. Case in point, Social Security. Professors Whitty from the university and Professor Commons are the ones that architected Social Security and unemployment insurance. They also, the university, in bringing together policymakers, were the ones that created workmen's compensation. They said enough of taking advantage of working people and let's hold corporations responsible. Because that's what we do here in Wisconsin. It's not just about talking about progressive ideas, it's about implementing progressive ideas. But look, let's be honest. The past 10 years, our progressive values have been under attack with the conservatives here in our state. You know, we just saw most recently Robin Vos and the GOP literally turned down an opportunity that would have provided health care for low-income Wisconsinites. Over 90,000 Wisconsinites would have had access to health care, and literally our state would have gotten over $1 billion in money to help us address our health care crisis. But instead, the Republicans said no and are spending our tax dollars trying to illegitimize an election that we have proven over and over again is truly the voice of the people. And then you go look at Congress, and Ron Johnson is using his pedestal to not only peddle junk science, he's denying climate change, and literally he's empowering the January 6th insurrectionists by saying it was a peaceful protest. And when literally millions of Wisconsinites were struggling at the height of the pandemic, Ron Johnson said, I'm not going to help them. He voted against any sort of relief that would have helped by $1,400 checks in people's pockets, help small businesses, and expand the vaccination program. So, look, we are here today celebrating our progressive history, but we've got to stop what the conservatives have been doing to that state. And how do we do that? Well, for starters, let's look at what Fighting Bob La Follette always told us. If you see something wrong, you got to change it. And I will tell you, as a fifth-generation Wisconsinite and as the daughter of 2 public school teachers, that is something my parents also instilled at me at a very early age, is that when you see something wrong, you've got to stand up and you've got to do something about it. As my dad always said, government, the way that government should work is sometimes you need a hand and sometimes you lend a hand. And look, I've been trying to fight for what's right. Whether it is trying to save the state treasurer's office when literally Scott Walker was putting this awful power grab on our state, to one of the first things that I did when I was elected was overturn a Republican gag order where we couldn't even talk about climate change. And most recently, when the Republican legislature decided not to meet for 300 days in the middle of a pandemic when people were hurting, I stepped up and started a foreclosure prevention fund. I literally helped finance 180 projects across the state and gave money to our public schools so they could buy hotspots and e-learning books. But I don't need to tell folks here at the Fighting Bob Fest about the importance of fighting because we know it. But I just want to emphasize, now more than ever, it is all hands on deck. We've seen most recently, whether it is the law that is coming out of Texas with the attack on women's reproductive rights, to looking what is happening in Georgia, attacking on voting rights, to what's happening in Arizona, where they're trying to illegitimize an election that the people made clear in that state. So how do we start doing things like that? Well, we've got to first make sure we get rid of the filibuster, because that's what's making sure, the voice of the people matter. And that is putting a stop on that. The other thing is we have to elect progressives literally from top to bottom, whether that's for county clerk, to our justices, to even U.S. Senate. We know this 2022 election is going to be incredibly important. It's going to be here before we know it. So we've got to start now. We've got to organize, and I know everybody here together we can get back to our progressive tradition and keep fighting. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to fighting alongside with you.
Learning to see. To say that I did not grow up under the legacy of the La Follette name would be absurd. These two-dimensional heirlooms captured ghosts in elaborate frames. They clung precariously to the stairwell wall. I used to take them down very carefully to compare facial structures, try on old-fashioned hairdos, and make up backstories. These stories were stemmed and manipulated from spied-on snippets of adult conversations gathered from hiding underneath a dining room table. We're all made up of the stories around us. I am my mother's, my grandmother's, and my great-grandmother's daughter. And so are you. Humans weave our own history by the stories we tell, the symbols we hold, and the traditions we pass on. It's through these stories, symbols, and traditions that we gain the innate ability to hold hands through time. So what elders' hands are you holding on to? I hold close to the story of Belle's learning to see. Although I can't seem to find the actual oratory that she wrote, the story is clear. Belle took a zoology laboratory class, a course in which no grades were given to advance her transcript. In this laboratory, that had nothing to do with her major, Belle clearly had a transformative moment. What she saw in this class gave her no credit. However, it became the commencement speech and won the much-coveted Lewis Prize from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She was given a dish, an ecosystem, a tiny world of sea urchins, starfish, and coral. She was then asked by zoologist Burge to tell me what you see. As Nancy Unger so beautifully weaves together in her book, Belle Case found herself amazed at how little she knew of the art of truly seeing. In her speech, Learning to See, Belle criticized adults for subverting children's natural curiosity by insisting that they study textbooks and learn scientific names, to the exclusion of encouraging independent investigation and discovery. This defense of the sheer joy of learning was chosen to be delivered at commencement, an honor not extended to Bob La Follette, who was by this time universally recognized as the class's most gifted speaker. I, like my grandfather and my great-grandfather, am no natural academic. I am much more of the trickster role. You can find me climbing a tree or dreaming up some mischief with the salamanders by the stream. This tomboy married a feminist. I have the privilege to dream because of Belle's work. And in turn, Belle had the privilege of education because of her grandmother's work. Again, from Unger's book. Lucetta, born in New York, 1808, would later tell her beloved granddaughter that as a child she traveled with her family by an ox-drawn wagon from Vermont. With no chance of a formal education, she studied the Bible and devoted herself to developing the many skills necessary to lead the virtually self-sustaining life of a pioneer, far from doctors, stores, and other conveniences. Lucetta washed and dried her family clothing, all of which she made from scratch. She spun raw cotton or wool into yarn, wove the yarn colored with homemade vegetable dyes into fabric, then cut and sewed it into garments. She dripped candles, dried fruits, churned butter, made cheese, kept bees for honey, and boiled the sap she tapped from maple trees into sugar. She studied nature assiduously and learned to use it in a myriad of ways for her family's advantage. She could name the constellations and tell time by the stars, and treated the illness of family members with the natural growing herbs that she identified and gathered. Belle asked her grandmother if she hated such work, and Lucetta replied, "I could never hate something that needs to be done." I believe that Belle saw her grandmother Lucetta in that ecosystem of magical sea creatures, learning from their harmonious living relationships with one another. She took the time away from the grind of industrialized education to gain new perspective, or rather, ancient perspective. Mollusks are teachers too. As we reflect on the past 100 years, I'm filled with gratitude. I am the mother of boys who can grow up to be girls if they want to, and why shouldn't they want to? I'm grateful for this enduring community of movers and shakers who are the guardians of the La Follette legacy. It's your legacy. Thank you for your stewardship and preservation of this symbol so that all can come to sit and speak, or sit silently and hold hands with our ancestors. As Lucetta made clear to Belle, there's just no time for hate, but there sure is a lot of work to be done. Onward, and thank you.
The slightest chill pervades the air, the wind of soft September surrounds us as we walk alone, trying to remember. The year is turning like the leaves, the battles she once fought in are fading like sweet summer days, like her, almost forgotten. May we all honor in our work the heroes of our history. May they return to bring us hope from roots sunk deep in memory. May old acquaintance be renewed, may no ill wind forestall it, and may we always keep the faith the faith of Belle LaFollette. No street, no highway bears her name. No statue shows her strong and proud. No building tall is named for her. Such silence where she spoke so loud. No mural of the fierce campaigns she proudly cast her lot in. The present overwhelms the past until it's near forgotten. May we all honor in our work the heroes of our history. May they return to bring us hope from roots sunk deep in memory. May old acquaintance be renewed, may no ill wind forestall it, and may we always keep the faith of Belle LaFollette. There are those who hide at home, waiting for the storm to pass, while others find security in fighting hard and standing fast. From racial justice to world peace, from suffrage to the picket line, Belle led the struggles of her day with vision far beyond her time. May we all honor in our work the heroes of our history. May they return to bring us hope from roots sunk deep in memory. May old acquaintance be renewed. May no ill wind befall it. And may we always keep the faith of Belle LaFollette.
Brothers and sisters, I'm sorry that I can't be with you tonight, but I will be with you on Saturday morning when we gather at the cemetery to dedicate the grave of Robert M. La Follette once more, and that of Belle LaFollette, and to remember the progressive movement that gave life to so much of what is great about Wisconsin. We gather here today to remember Bobfest itself, and to remember La Follette, to remember that Robert M. La Follette taught us more than 100 years ago that dissent in a time of war is not merely your right, it is your duty. And La Follette taught us that lesson on the eve of World War I, a war so disastrous that it begat a Second World War barely 20 years after it was done. Those of us who forged the first Fighting Bobfest 20 years ago did so in a time when another war was being anticipated, indeed when another war was being launched. In the aftermath of 9/11, there was a great pressure to respond to that terrible attack with militarism, with new wars, new invasions, new occupations. But there was a handful of people who recognized that that was the wrong course. They said it at the time. They warned us of what would happen. Barbara Lee alone voted against authorizing the use of military force for endless forever wars. Around the same time, just weeks later, Russ Feingold, the senator from Wisconsin, an heir to the La Follette tradition, voted alone in the United States Senate against the Patriot Act and the repression that extended from a moment of endless war, forever wars, permission for presidents and vice presidents to do as they chose. And here in Wisconsin, Ed Garvey and a handful of allies came together and said, we need to rally. We need to unite a mass of people in opposition to this rush to war, to this rush to repression. The first Fighting Bob Fest was founded in that spirit and in that sensibility. And the bottom line that people must remember today is that those who gathered 20 years ago for the first Fighting Bob Fest were right. They were absolutely right. Now, the first Fighting Bob Fest, actually, this is the 20th. The first Fighting Bob Fest was held in 2002, and it was held in the aftermath of 9/11, in the aftermath of Barbara Lee's vote, in the aftermath of Russ Feingold's vote, but on the eve of the votes that would lead us into the war in Iraq. And that first Fighting Bob Fest was an anti-war gathering. People talked about the threat that was being posed. They talked about the danger that was surfacing. They got to the heart of the matter. And the fact is that by and large, those of us who were right were dismissed. We weren't given the platforms to speak to the whole of the country. Overwhelmingly, our media erred on the side of those who wanted to go to war, of those who wanted to practice a new repression. But the proud and brave people that gathered for the first Fighting Bob Fest and for the Fighting Bob Fest that followed, they stood true, not merely to their own principles, but to the core principles of this republic, that a rush to war is never the right move, that a rush to repress dissent is never the right move, that the La Follette tradition was the right tradition. And now, 20 years on, as we watch the end, finally, of our occupation of Afghanistan, we gather to say a few simple truths. First and foremost, we thank Joe Biden for doing the right thing and getting our troops out of Afghanistan and ending that forever war. But we also gather to say something else, that George W. Bush got everything wrong in 2001 and 2002, that Dick Cheney got everything wrong in 2001 and 2002, that the military-industrial complex got everything wrong in 2001 and 2002, that they chose a route that was not going to make us safer, that was not going to make us freer, that was not going to make this a better country or this world a better place. But some people got it right. Barbara Lee got it right. Russ Feingold got it right. Ed Garvey got it right. And the people who gathered for that first Fighting Bob Fest and for the Fighting Bob Fests that have followed have gotten it right. We have understood, and we still understand, that dissent in a time of war is not a privilege, it is not merely a right, it is a duty, and we have stood true to that patriotic duty. I welcome you tonight, I stand in solidarity with you, and I tell you, this will not be the last Bob Fest. We will gather again, and we will build the cooperative Commonwealth and a nation of peace and justice. Solidarity.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this virtual 20th annual Fighting Bob Fest. We're so glad that you could be here with us. We wish we could all be together, but this year, again, we're a virtual event. Hopefully next year we'll all be together again in the Barrymore Theater. Saturday morning, if you're in Madison, we're going to be at Forest Hill Cemetery at 10 a.m., rededicating the grave markers of Fighting Bob and Belle La Follette that have been newly restored. We have a number of speakers there, including some members of the La Follette family and music from the Raging Grannies. So please, if you're able to join us Saturday morning at Forest Hill Cemetery in Madison, Wisconsin, we'll be there celebrating the lives and legacies of Fighting Bob and Belle Case La Follette. I want to thank all of our speakers tonight and the musicians who donated their time. I want to thank the Barrymore Theater for opening their doors to us to record and produce this virtual event this year. Thanks to Brian Alberth and Left Effect Media for filming this, and thanks to you for attending virtually. You can always check out the Progressive Magazine online at progressive.org. And please subscribe and donate to The Progressive to help us keep bringing you the voices of progressive activists around the country, working to create change, working for peace and justice and a better world. Thank you all so much.